The following readings are from the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. Each week we read from both scriptures as prescribed by Yoganandaji and by his guru, Sri Yukteswarji, who was guided by Babaji to compare the two scriptures to show the same underlying truths between us. This is week 22, called The Inner Kingdom. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Most people imagine that the inner kingdom, as Christ described it, lacks the fascination that attribute to sense life, the bright lights, the diverse attractions, the joys and the laughters. Little do they realize what a vast universe exists in their own selves. There are many passages in the Bible that describe aspects of this inner kingdom. We read, and the Lord planted a garden eastward in Eden, and the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. This garden was in no earthly place. It exists even now in the very self of every human being. The legend of Adam and Eve is allegorical. It describes how the first human beings dissipated their spiritual energy centered in the spine. The spine is the channel through which flows the river of baptism and of spiritual life. The Bhagavad Gita tells us, the wise speak of an eternal Ashvata tree, and its roots above and its branches below. The tree of life spoken of also in the Bible is the spine. Its roots are above in the brain's energy. Its branches are the outward spreading nervous system. When the sap, which is to say the energy, flows downward, the consciousness is drawn into delusion. On the other hand, when the energy is drawn upward in deep meditation, the consciousness is drawn toward its eternal source, God, and is at last united with him. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita therefore urges his chief disciple Arjuna to embrace the yoga science, the path of meditation. The yogi, he says, is greater than the ascetic, greater even than the followers of the paths of wisdom, jnana yoga, or of action, karma yoga. Be thou, O Arjuna, a yogi. For those who would find the divine truth, Krishna gives this description of the yogi. Steadfast a lamp burns, sheltered from the wind, steadfastly meditating, solitary. Such is the likeness of the yogi's mind, shut from sense storms and burning bright into heaven. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Dharmini was saying because our bodies think it is 10 p.m., we're speaking from the chair rather than from the bed. The chair is a step up. And Vidya, do you want to come in a little closer? You can hear in many of Swamiji's satsangs in the early years at his home this sort of almost ritualistic phrase that if those of you sitting by the door could come into the room, then other people who are arriving later will have a place to come into. And why? Because he needed a bigger space. And looking around, I would say we do too. It's funny how when we expanded into this temple from our smaller temple in Alwarpet, how it came sort of just in time. And in case you didn't notice, if you looked up when coming through the gate, there are different beams and things sticking out where there used to just be sky, because the landlord is building this structure that will become a new temple. This will still be a temple, of course, but this will be a new temple and also a new space for us to gather. That means on a May afternoon, you won't have to sit this close together, a little more room. We can energize without fear of knocking anyone out. And so it's really going to be wonderful to have that space for itself, a larger place for all of us, but also as another place. Because as you may have noticed, sometimes we've had to have classes all moved around or at different times, or can you do your class at 2 a.m.? The temple is free then, because there's just not a lot of space during the prime time that we do our classes. So this will be another space. And if you haven't already heard, we'll talk more about that project as the time goes closer. We'll probably do a blessing for this site at some point now that we're all back here together, and so that it goes well, so the workers stay safe, all these things. But I have to confess that it's so nice to see you, and please feel that from our hearts. If everything I say does not make complete sense, just attribute it to jet lag. It's very tempting to say, let us bask in the flow of divine friendship and meditate now. And so on. It reminds me... Yeah, long snore, exactly. Well, there's no way to tell it without telling it. My mother was asking me about different things that she had observed someone doing in meditation, someone from Ananda. And when she asked this person about, what is it that you're doing? He said, I prefer not to speak of it. And so she was a little confused and a little mildly concerned. So she asked me, she saw him doing a particular mudra and said, what is that? And so I explained the purpose of that mudra, and she said, okay. And then she asked about something else, and I said, well, we sit that way to help with the energy flow in the spine, just as Dharmini was reading. And she said, what technique is this? I said, that is the technique of falling asleep. And she said, I thought so, but I asked. He said, no, I'm not falling asleep. Sort of an affirmation. But don't you want to say no, just because I don't want to embarrass the person. But yeah, somebody who shares a similar DNA to myself. Well, it's really, the topic is the inner kingdom, and it's sort of hard to really put one's mind on the inner kingdom when here you all are, like a bouquet of souls, as Master would say, and so many old friends, new friends, and now we have medium friends also in between. If you came before COVID, you're an old timer now, and but some people we've known for many more years beyond that. And it's always a joy to make new friends, too. Someone once asked Swamiji in a satsang when he had been away from Ananda village for a while, he said, do you have any advice for the newer devotees? And Swamiji said, love God. He said, that's the only thing there is to do, is to love God. And then he said, mind you, you're not a newer devotee. You know, where we plug in this lifetime is no measure of how long we've been on the path. The veriest newcomer could be, meaning new arrival, could be someone who's, been on the path longest of all. But though I say measure, it's no measure. In fact, that word isn't a good word. We shouldn't measure. We shouldn't compare. We are as close to God as we are. Again, as the reading said, wishing, we can't change that for the mere wishing. We are where we are. We should rejoice because we're aimed in the right direction. We're going forward, and that's all we have to do. And really, that's our only business. It reminds me of the phrase Master said, when you sit to meditate, mean business. So it's using the word in a different context. But just that we should help others, we should pray for others, but our responsibility is right here on our own shoulders and between our ears, our brain, our mind, our heart, and how we can grow, how we can give. What if you're having trouble with somebody else or with a situation, or other people are having trouble, or someone you're just worried about? Care. I'm not saying don't care. But you may find after a while that you start out praying, but we just end up wringing our hands because we realize there's nothing I can do except worry. And worry doesn't accomplish anything except stresses our bodies. And then when the person says, I need your help, say, sorry, I'm sick. I need help because I worried myself into illness. So pray And you know what too much worry also implies? I realized this when I was having a really good worry. I realized, meaning a good, heavy, thorough, tiring worry, I realized me worrying is sort of implying that God is not on the job, that God is on vacation, then I need to keep my mind on this situation. You know, God is taking care of it. God is blessing the person. It's good to add prayer. Prayer has an effect. That's why prayer is not only useful because it stops us from worrying, but it has an actual positive effect. And now there have been a lot of studies. One of my favorite one is the people in the hospital who got better when people were praying for them, and they didn't know the people were praying for them. I mean, it's one thing if someone says, I'm praying for you. Oh, well, then I better get better. I don't want to inconvenience you, all those prayers. But when you don't even know someone's praying, and there's been other stories. Another favorite of mine is a man who had a near-death experience where he was physically, clinically dead for a while and then came back to the body. And he had this experience. Obviously, he came back to the body. That's how we heard about it. But he said that he found himself basically in a very uplifted place, and he felt a little surprised to be there. Like, maybe they got me mixed up with someone else. Why did I get into this place? He sort of thought he wouldn't make it that far. And I don't know how this all manifests. But when he was sort of enjoying and kind of congratulating himself that, oh, not so bad, he sort of had this urge to look behind him, and he looked behind and he saw this sort of tunnel. It was sort of like a tunnel, but it was sort of scenes from his life. So if you can kind of imagine like a cylindrical movie screen, looking through it and seeing all these scenes from his life of him doing not very impressive things. But at the end of the tunnel was his mother praying for him. And he realized that the message that came through to him was that it was on the strength of her prayers that he had gotten to where he was, not on the strength of his own merit. And I don't know if he was asked to go back, but he wanted to come back, I should say, from our perspective. And he came back to resolve to live a better life, and he became a religious person and a spiritual teacher to live a better life so he could get there based on his own accomplishment. But what that says is, again, his mother's prayers made a difference. So your prayers for your children, for anybody, make a huge difference. But remember, let God do a matching gift. Do your part, let God do the rest, so that we're not just worrying and focusing on things we can do nothing about. Sri Yukteswar, as you know, was a saint of wisdom. Master is a saint of love, a saint of joy. But Master says in his early years with Sri Yukteswar, he said, I had a habit of expressing grief for someone else's suffering. That's not wrong. Again, you have to understand the story correctly. Compassion, kindness is very important. But when he would express grief, basically overdoing it, Sri Yukteswar would say, what are you bothering with that for? He said, in this way, he was showing me how to be free inside. He said, my family was good intention, but they were making me a slave. And so if you say, what? We don't have to worry about people? Good, because I don't worry about people anyway. No, that's not the moral of the story. But not to overly worry, not to be overly responsible for things that are not within our control. What's within our control? Potentially ourself. That's it. Okay? So in the inner kingdom then, which sort of does go along with this, to live in the spine. And it's funny how the reading says most people imagine that the outer kingdom is the thing that's so wonderful and the inner kingdom would be dull. And I thought, is that so? Well, of course it's so, but it's just been a while since I've been thinking in that way, many years. Because you just have a little bit of a taste of the inner kingdom, and that's enough. So remember that. If you've tasted the joy of your own soul, in meditation, which first starts perhaps as just a bit of calmness in meditation, a bit of feeling fresh afterwards, then that is enough to encourage people to keep going because they've had an experience. As you've heard me say before, it's sort of like teaching someone to enjoy Mysore pak. How many Mysore pak enjoyment classes have you been to? Zero. No one. There's never been one, because all you have to. I have graduated. I have learned. And Jude brought up the wonderful point when I stated this once. He said, yes, but we didn't require any education to learn to like it. But to love God, to be good, to do all those things, they're not always, sweet and tasty at the first bite. It's true. Master said that virtuous ways, he said, they taste like vinegar in the beginning, but they taste like honey at the end. And he said, doing the wrong thing is poisoned honey. Poisoned honey will taste good, he said, but it will kill you. And so the thing that I'm saying is a little bit of inner experience actually does feel good. Just a little relief, a little joy, a little bit of calmness that comes for no reason. Not because something got fixed or somebody's finally started behaving themselves, but just because I am strong in myself, I am complete in myself, not because I affirm it, but because I feel it. And so you have that, and it's enough. So if someone hasn't tasted that in the inner kingdom yet in their lives, then don't be surprised if they think it's boring or they question why you do it, just because they haven't tasted. If you eat Meiserpak, does anyone question you? Well, maybe your doctor says, watch out for sugar problems. But otherwise they say, yes, please share. Like my cousin who will cut a piece in half because she's minding her sugar and have one half and then the other half. And so keep in mind that that it's natural for people. In fact, there's an additional explanation for why someone might say, forget the inner kingdom, seek the outer kingdom. Why waste your time? Navel gazing, that phrase you may have heard. There's actually a mudra called Navi Kriya, and I wonder if somebody saw somebody doing that and said, oh, are you gazing at your navel? And that's where the phrase came from, thinking that's all you accomplish. My gosh. You see someone in that posture, they may have exited the body, maybe floating around the astral world before they come back. Who knows? There's a lot more going on. This world is much less real. This world is actually kind of dreamy, like a dream in the sense of not being clear. And you say, well, no, compared to the inner world, this is much. But think about it. If we even try to remember 2 days ago, what meals did we have? Exactly. You could say easy, idli for breakfast, dosa for lunch, and dinner chapati. But the thing is, because I have that every night or something. No, but even the thoughts you might have been thinking when you first woke up this morning or last night before going to bed. Okay, you have to piece it together. Okay, let's see. Saturday, which means office was at 10 a.m., but I was... Netiki, huh? It's a blur. It's a dream. It's about as difficult sometimes as trying to remember a dream that we had in the morning. Whereas real deep spiritual experience is not like that. It is vivid, it is clear. As soon as you think of it, it's like the experience comes back as if you're reliving it. It's amazing that level of clarity that one can have in a superconscious experience, in memory of one even. So I was saying there's another explanation of why people may encourage you to come out of the inner kingdom and explore the inner kingdom and outer kingdom. If I mix those up, just forgive me. There's no hope. There's no hope for me right now. No chance of getting it right every time. So is that, of course, tamasic, rajasic, sattvic. Okay, so rajasic is active. Tamasic is sleepy. In fact, the one teacher was explaining it to his class of young children at Ananda village, and he said, tamas is the sleepy guna. And there was one girl in the classroom who had actually a difficult time in her home. Her home was not very stable, and so sometimes she would even be sleeping a little during class. And at that moment, when he said the sleepy guna, people looked at her and she was kind of nodding off, and they all started laughing. And she said, "Hey, I am not a sleepy tuna." And so then sattva guna is the spiritual one. But if you look at someone who's very still, You may not. I mean, I've seen this very recently on an airplane, and I could have seen it if I were looking in a mirror. Someone sitting very still might be meditating, or they might be asleep. You might not know. If you know. That might be a clue. But otherwise, we might not know. In other words, compared to Rajasic energy, Tamas and Sattva, they have some similar elements outwardly, being still, for example. But a Rajasic person, meaning that's most of their life experience, the only thing they've seen as stillness is Tamasic energy. And Rajasic, at least your energy is moving. It's a step up. So if then someone comes along, a Rajasic person sees a very still person in the inner kingdom, they say, what's the matter with you? Why don't you do something? Accomplish something? What are you wasting time for? Because it looks Tamasic. And what else would they think? You see? So in other words, it's very easy to be patient, compassionate, and understanding. And in fact, they really should be rejecting Tamasic energy to affirm their greater level of energy that they have in their life compared to that. Except they should also mind their own business. But anyway, never mind. So that's actually a part of what I was just saying. If we mind other people's business too much, we have spent too much time outside ourselves, and we have to come back and come inside. There's a Bengali chant, Dakoma it's called, which basically says, when your thoughts cry with sorrow, call Ma. And Swamiji translated it into English slightly differently, because if he says, when your thoughts cry with sorrow, call Ma, then the Americans would be like, beep, 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 Ama? My thoughts cry with sorrow, fix it. So they don't understand, of course, Ma. So he said, when your thoughts cry with sorrow, go with, oh my mind. Sorry, when your thoughts cry with sorrow, oh my mind, go within. When all men disappoint you, oh my mind, go within. And when false dreams come to seize you, again, maybe things will be better out there, go within. And so tell your mind. It's interesting because it's a dialogue in the chant that you're having with your own mind. As if there's a part of you that is wiser than your mind, separate from your mind, observing the thoughts, the urges, the desires, and saying, okay, you've had your fun and you can continue on for another minute or two, and then let's go within and recharge ourselves. You can even negotiate and say, I will go back to desiring and worrying in 10 minutes, but for 10 minutes I'm going to take a break just to go within. And that's why it's so refreshing, because the source of our energy is in the spine. In terms of in the body, the source of our energy is God and infinity, but it's expressed and strongest in our spine and brain. And so removing these tentacles and tendrils, which is to say withdrawing them, centering them in the spine, helps us to recharge. So if you feel in the mood, I sort of feel like it's time for a New Year's resolution on May 28th. It's a little late. Or you could say, good, 5 months I already gone, so I only have to do it for 7. But let's, if you feel inspired to, let's try to spend a little more time going within. No matter what we're doing, this temple project is going to be very much an outward activity. And as I said, there'll be a lot for us to do together. The landlord is working on the structure, the bones, the 4 walls, but everything besides the 4 walls and the floor is up to all of us. And Jyotishji and Deviji will be coming near the end of the year to bless the temple. And that will be a great joy to have them here to do that. As they blessed this temple, so that one. But even if we're very busy outwardly, which is to say even when we are busy outwardly, because I think we're all busy outwardly, take a moment, take a break, whether it's with a mental withdrawal to stop, maybe chant, pray, talk to God, call a spiritual buddy of yours. Sometimes we can't do it on our own. We need help. Just talking to someone else kind of breaks the energy of the other minds around us. And then also, of course, you say, well, I don't have any buddies, which is then talk to somebody here, and then you'll have one. Reminds me of Swami Ramatirtha. He was arriving in America on a ship, and an American man came up to him and said, so, basically, Mr. Indian Yogi, because, he sort of didn't seem like the other travelers. He said, what are you doing? Have you been to America? No, it's my first time. He said, do you have any friends in America? And Swami Ramatirtha said, I have one. And the man said, who? And Swami said, you. And the man was so charmed by this that he ended up, hosting him in his lecture tour and everything. And so who knows, maybe it was a past life thing. But in any case, why did he stop him and why did he care? Why did he worry in the first place? But also, if nothing else, or in addition to everything else, if nothing else works, or in addition to everything else, just remember, just stop and meditate. Just stop and do Kriya. It can be the most hopeless situation, the most restless mind. You stop and do Kriya, especially if you're nervous. Something's about to you're about to go into a meeting, or you're about to just stop and do Kriya, and you'll be amazed at even just a few seconds, a few minutes. I'm talking about during the day. Your sadhana, of course, is a different thing, but just during the day, when you need help, it just makes us smarter. It brings us back into ourselves. It makes us stronger, more balanced, more sort of squarely on our 2 feet, more centered in our source of strength. And then the same situation you may see from a completely different perspective, or you may get no new information, but you will have centered your energy, which also strengthens your magnetism, which then may draw the right response from people and so on. We were coming into immigration, and here, and the person said, put your left hand on the fingerprint scanner. You basically feel like you're being booked at the police station, but you want to come into the country. So he said, when was your last visit? I said, last month. You were here last. I said, yeah, and you should have seen the people when we were leaving. They said, when is your entry stamp? And Dharmini said, 4 years ago. You see, 4 years ago? Is it because of COVID? But so even the passport people. Anyway, so he said to me, put your left hand on this, criminal thing, scanner. And this is a hand I have, and so I put it, left hand, oh, sorry. And I just kind of looked at him and he said, you've been on such a long flight, you've been traveling, of course you're tired. Scan again. Anyway, won't tell the rest of the story. I don't know how many times. I must have scanned like 5 times each finger. Anyway, never mind.
His hands
But
were too dry.
He said
mine were too wet. And so he had to do them over and over again.
He gave me a hand lotion. So anyway, you attract. We say, what's the point of that story? Hopefully there was something. Either it was my magnetism, or it was his pity on looking at this person trying to function still. So remember that you don't have to have the answers, but if you go inside and you go deep, things will work themselves out because you'll be open more to God's help, and you'll also be able to draw more on whatever energy you do have, whatever clarity. And when in doubt, when worried, just pray and take solace, take peace in the inner kingdom.